Hi, thanks so much for coming. My name's Steve Gravestock. I'm the Senior International Programmer for Canada and the Nordic region here at TIFF. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to TIFF Bell Lightbox, to See the North, which is our year-round series of Canadian classics, screened for free. And of course, to tonight's screening of Srinivas Krishna's Masala. To begin, we'd like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. I'd also like to, on behalf of TIFF, I'd also like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa, and TIFF Cinematheque's public supporters, Ontario Creates, and the Canada Council for the Arts. Big thanks also to Classic FM Radio and Zoomer Radio, our program sponsors. As a charitable organization, we'd also like to thank our donors and members, people like you guys, for making TIFF's year-round programming, educational, and community outreach initiatives possible. It's a real pleasure to be up here to introduce this film and this filmmaker. Srinivas is a patented inventor, installation artist, and filmmaker. We had the privilege of doing one of his installations outside the ROM a couple years ago, a really major piece. He launched his career with the international hit Masala. His films have premiered at Toronto, Sundance, and Cannes, and were distributed worldwide. He's also made Lulu in 1996 and Ganesh Boy Wonder in 2009. I'm really happy to be up here to introduce this film because it was one of the films that got me interested in Canadian film. Please join me in welcoming the filmmaker, Srinivas Krishna. Hey.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody, for coming out to see this film, which I made a long time ago. I was, I think, about 25, 26 when I made the film. It was my first feature film. It was so long ago, I can hardly remember sometimes what happened. It was just such a remarkable experience. Some of the people I made the film with are here. I think Mike Munn, our editor, is here. I'm trying to see who else. Ronika Sajanani, who acts in the film, is here. Ronika, raise your hand. She's back there. I'm trying to see. Oh my God, Tamara, there you are. Yeah, she made it. Tamara Deverell, our production designer, is here. Anyone else? Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Yes. Oh, my God. Our Mountie. Oh, my God. Okay. So, no, you didn't. I didn't recognize you. So it's, for me, a real treat to see everyone again. And also, so many of the people who worked on that film, it was, for many, they're, our first feature for all of us. We're a very young crew. I think the oldest person on the set was maybe 30 years old. So it was the beginning of a long of our careers for all of us, and everyone here has really went on to have spectacular, careers in the film industry in Canada and abroad. Some of the people in this film are no longer with us. Saeed Jaffrey, who is really the star of this film, passed away more than a year ago. He acts in 3 roles in the film, and that happened, well, it's a long story, I won't go into it now, but it worked out in a remarkable way for just the quality of the performances that he brought out. For him, it was, in some ways, a real defining role for him. Zora Sehgal, who plays Grandma Tiku, is no longer with us either, and so I want to remember her. I stayed in touch with both those individuals for many years after the film was made, and they're both really wonderful people. For Zora, who, when she acted in the film, was 80 years old, she had already had a career, was in kind of semi-retirement, and when she appeared in this film, she went on to have another whole decade or almost 2 decades of film, stardom. So that was really great too. So those are some of the things I wanted to say. Yes? Oh my gosh. Ishwarlal is also, yes, Ishwarlal is not here either with us, so I wanted to acknowledge him. Yeah. Wonderful performance and a wonderful man. So thanks again for coming. I think we're going to have a question and answer afterwards, and Absolutely. I'll be happy to talk to you after the film, so enjoy.
Stick around, we'll be back. Once again, please welcome Srinivas Krishna.
Thank you.
Questions? Actually, I thought we'd just so you guys know we're recording this. So if you could just wait for the mics, before you ask your question. I did want to right off the top. This film did a variety of radical things, but I think one of the key things is how it played out after it premiered at the festival. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. Now that I know this is going to be recorded, I'm not going to say many things that I would otherwise. After the film was made, many things happened. One, nobody really wanted to release the film. They didn't think there was an audience for it. We tried to, we had a distributor that tried to get into the Carlton and it wouldn't play there. They thought there was no audience for it. And so finally we got it into the Bloor Cinema when it was before the Hot Docs Rogers Cinema that it is today. And there was a great write-up in the Globe and Mail, and there was a feature in Now Magazine. And
the cover,
yeah. And as a result, opening night at the Bloor, there was a lineup around, the entire block, 2, lengthwise, and it was packed, and it remained packed for 2 weeks. And then on the back of that, we got it into the backstage for a kind of courtesy screening in the afternoons. But it was sold out at the backstage every afternoon. So the other film that was playing there was Hook, Steven Spielberg film, and Masala was doing better, so they bumped Hook and they just ran Masala there, and it ran for 6 months at the backstage, which is, for those of you who may not know, because it was so long ago, it was the theater behind the Varsity.
the Uptown.
Oh, the Uptown, right. And behind...
But near the...
Yeah, exactly, on Bermuda, right, yeah. And it was... the first Canadian film that achieved foreign sales on the strength of its domestic box office. And that's, a very rare thing in those days. So, and the film went on to be released in the UK and in the US and worldwide. And that took me another 3 years after making the film. Yeah.
Cool. People should follow your lead. Next, anyone want to ask a question? Comments? Maybe, yeah, there we go. We got a mic here, if we can get it here. The lady right there. Right here. Here we go. Yeah, if you could just keep your hand up. Yeah.
Hi. Hello. Thanks for that. That was very enjoyable. As a, I guess, 32-year-old, half South Asian, half white Canadian, who works in the arts, and trying to figure out how to position identity and in such a mixed world that we're living in here in Toronto and Canada. Seeing that for the first time was very inspiring and very, I think, encouraging to see that amongst confusion and amongst multiple things happening, that magical things can come from it, and hope can come from it. And, I thought that it was so amazing to see the representation of the whole Air India situation and kind of the positions of Sikh people in that, and kind of just the multiplicity of South Asians in Canada kind of was all coming on there and telling off Krishna, and it's like, whoa, like naked people. It's like, damn. It's a very it was just very encouraging, inspiring that you can do it all. You can get it all. It would have been good to see some queer action in there. That was one thing I was thinking. Maybe that's Masala too. But yeah, I'm so happy that Anand told me to come, and that you're here to present it, and that people are still here, because I think that we are in a time of figuring out what the next, representations should be and what they can be. So I feel very full, and I just want to say thank you.
Well, thanks very much. That's really great to hear that after so many years, that this work speaks to you today. Thank you.
In the middle there, yes. We get the mic over, yeah. Whoever gets the mic first, yeah. There we go.
Hi, I worked on this show. I was the lead or the set tech or whatever. And I just was curious. I remember the big buzz around this film, even the buzz when we were making it. Because remember Toronto was like Parachute Club. It was all of a sudden it was waking up and being kind of more funky all of a sudden. And I always wondered why you didn't make a movie like right away. Like where was the second movie? Like it just felt like we were all waiting for the next one.
That's a great question. I had well, there's many reasons why I didn't. One, I was occupied trying to get this one out, and that took a lot of effort. Two, I also had a really bad accident right after I made the movie. It was a bicycle accident that resulted in a concussion that put me in and out of a coma for 5 days in the hospital, and it took me years to actually recover from that. So it slowed me down, and everything that was easy before then became just a lot harder. So and by the time I really did want to make more of this kind of film, I think the world had kind of eclipsed me or had gone past that moment, and we were on to other conversations. So I think that opportunity passed, and I think it passed for the city also and for the culture. I think it was a certain moment that enabled this film to happen, at least in hindsight. That's what I see. And I think it would have been very hard to make this again because I think people became a lot more radicalized, and conversations became a lot harder afterwards. And certainly I just didn't feel comfortable putting myself out there in that climate. This is a film that I made when I was very young. And we all were. Yeah, we all were. I don't know that you can make this kind of film again. But that's okay, and so I think that's just the reality of things, and that was just the reality of that time. I was, talking to Steve earlier, and I had remarked that this is a film that really came out of the 70s and 80s. When I made it, it was 1990, and it was released in the early 90s, but it really came from a moment that was still had some openness, or a different kind of openness. We were really first generation, and many of us were first generation in many ways. People were coming out. We were all coming out in one way or another, declaring and exploring. And I think that window shut down pretty quickly by the time we got into the mid-90s, and it was a different moment, certainly. And I think it was hard to propose a film like this again. At least that was my experience. It may not have been the same for others. Thanks for asking that.
I wanted to ask you, the story here is so wild.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
The story here is so out of this world, and it's so different from every Indo-Canadian movie that was made before this and probably after this. Everything else has been arranged marriage, this arranged marriage, that. What resistance did you have when you came up with this script to the story? There's so much in there, and some of it I'm sure controversial. Did you have a lot of resistance from the people around you, from people who were funding you, people who were helping you about making a movie using the story elements that you had?
I have to tell the truth. I had some resistance because I had never made a feature film before. And so people really felt there wasn't an audience for this or who was the audience for it. But there was a good moment in Canadian film funding and in the environment in that time is that, we had institutional funders who were willing to take a chance. And they were almost like producers, they were willing to take a chance on something they believed in. And they didn't require a distribution license before even considering the film. So I was able to go to them and put it in front of them, and I got a star, Saeed Jaffrey, who had some cachet at that time, and I got him on my own merits. I called him up. I called directory assistants in London and just said, I want to speak to Saeed Jaffrey. And they said, well, we have 4 Saeed Jaffreys here. And I said, which one do you want? And I said, I want the movie star. And he says, oh, why didn't you say so? And they gave me his number, and he was listed. And I called him, and his wife answered and said, well, he's in Bombay. In those days, it was Bombay, shooting a film. Just send the script and he'll get back to you. And he sure enough did. And I waited for a month. I didn't go away for Christmas. I sat back, by the phone for a month because we didn't have cell phones in those days, and answering machines were just coming out, and I didn't want to miss the call. And he called one day, just the day before Christmas. He called and he said, I love this script. And I said, well, would you write me a letter saying you'd want to be in this film? He said, yeah. And that changed my life. It changed my life because there was an environment that would accept that from a 25-year-old, and I didn't need a distributor. And I'd spoken to all those distributors before with my script. They wouldn't read my script, but excuse me, the minute I had the star and I had some funding behind it, those very same distributors who wouldn't, excuse me, talk to me before sent cars to pick me up for meetings. So that's how it happened. Excuse me. I think the real resistance I got was after the film was made. Honestly, it was from the distribution community, from the film industry, excuse me, but also from the people I thought who would be the audience for the film, Indians and the Indian community. I think a lot of people really didn't like the film, and not that they had seen it, but they didn't like what they heard about it, and that was tough.
Did Saeed Jaffrey know he's going to play 3 roles from the outset?
No, no, he didn't. We had a Canadian content issue. We could only have so many foreign actors. Excuse me.
Yeah, can
Yeah,
we
I'd love
get
some
some
water.
water maybe?
Oh my God. I don't know. Excuse me while I do this.
Just even consider.
Are you recording this?
No, we actually shut the cameras off, I think. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
No, I'm okay.
I think it was a cough drop that got me, actually. So just to continue that, the resistance that I got was really after the film was made, and it was really from the community that was responding very violently against the film. So that was, as I said, tough to take. In response to your question, Saeed Jaffrey didn't know he was going to act in 3 roles. I just offered him 1 role. But we had a Canadian content issue. We couldn't have more than a certain number of foreign actors. And, it was a big film. So he just said, would you just act in all these 3 these 3 parts, and we just solve that problem for us? And he was ecstatic. He was ecstatic. He said, yeah.
It's an amazing set of performances.
Yeah, it really is.
And I just to add to the gentleman's question and a comment on it, when you talk about Indo-Canadian cinema, this and Sam and Me would be the first features, really. I mean, there's not much before. I can't think of anything.
Well, there was
before.
one film that was made by Surjit Varghese. Right. That was it was a TV film, I think, but still, it was like a feature.
Yeah, but then there was quite a few after, but there was a bit of an explosion. But anyway, next question. Go ahead, the lady there. Oh, you got the mic. Go ahead.
I was wondering, so this movie came out in 91. If we could just talk a little bit about the juxtaposition between then, and you've touched on this, but there are still some things in the movie to me that feel quite radical and that we don't see, and particularly the love scenes and things like that, where we don't see that focus on brown bodies, but also the criticism of Indian communities, which to me I can understand Indians getting really upset, but it also feels like very much like an insider's criticism. And then you also talk about maybe not having the movie not really creating artistic space for you to keep making things like this or to keep making films or to get the support that you sort of imagined you would. Do you mind going a little bit deeper into just how interesting it is to see things now? I mean, I can name probably 3 TV shows that have brown leads, but still aren't really doing, still aren't showing love in an explicit way, still aren't criticizing the community from that perspective.
Yeah, that's a big question, and it's glad you asked it. I think you can appreciate from the film and from the fact that because this is being recorded, there's many things I would not say, is that I'm a pretty outspoken person, and I just don't think we live in a time where you can speak out without getting resistance. And I faced that after I made the film. And so it wasn't that the film didn't give me the opportunity. It's just that I didn't have the opportunity to continue to make films of that kind, after the fact, because I think society really had changed. That moment had passed. And I think we see it to this day when you say, well, we see shows where, people are still skirting around everything. And I say, why skirt around anything when you can just talk about it, So I don't know much more than what to say around that, except that that's just how it goes. Yeah, you're welcome.
Next, where do we have is the mic somewhere that I haven't? Yeah, go ahead. The lady there and then the gentleman there. Yeah, the lady here. Yeah.
Hello. So it's not a question, a comment, or maybe an observation, because you made this film in the 80s and then it was released in the 90s, and it's about more than one quarter of a...
Just to correct that, I wrote it in 89, 90, and I shot it in 90, and I finished in 91. So it was
almost
really
like
that.
I'm
bridge.
watching it after 25 plus years. And my observation is that, the movie has not grown old at all. It's a very young movie. It was like made last year or something, Maybe I was just trying to look at the locales, which part of Toronto. But yeah, I could see, the way you had filmed it, the way you've written. Some stories never grow old. This is a story. I found that it's repeating. And I'm a first generation myself, and I've been here only for a decade or some more time. But this is what it is still, the story is still pervading. The scenes, the locales, the situations, everything is brand new. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I don't know whether to say thank you or to feel bad about it, because, you'd think things would change, but yeah. I'm glad, again, it speaks to you. I mean, the truth is that I think some of the things the film speaks to don't change because they're just part of what it means to just, move to a country it's just experiences of that I tried to speak to honestly. And I think, we're a country of immigrants. And so people continue to experience variations on that and can recognize, their own experiences in the film. And I'm glad that still continues and that the film is able to communicate. Yeah, thank you.
Gentleman there. Yeah.
Hi. So I want to first of all,
Thanks for the water, by the way.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. So it was laced, but you'll be all right.
We only have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So.
Well, now I might just speak my mind.
It's the recording is just for us, really. So yeah.
First of all, it hasn't been mentioned yet, so I want to big you up with in the UK survey of top diasporic films, including Bend It Like Beckham, Baji on the Beach, My Beautiful Laundrette, all of those films that were made, Masala was named number 1, correct?
Yeah, it was an audience favorite.
Right. And I think the reason for that is the same reason why I responded to the film so much, is that it is still so young, fresh, dynamic. It's an insane movie. And it's a phenomenal effort. I'm interested in your influences in cinema and in writing that. And I'm also interested in whether there's anything you could say to like the time of this film is a time of Desh Padesh and a time of Beautiful Laundrette and a bunch of those films coming out. It seemed like there was a neo diasporic thing that was happening, and it just disappeared. All of kind of like the people who seemed to be the champions, yourself included, disappeared from the map, and the story shifted, and we're now in a much more corporatized place where these kinds of stories aren't being told, but I think they're going to come again. So I just wanted to know whether you, whether when you were inside of it, were you aware of that? When you came out of it, were you aware of that? And your influences in making it?
Thanks for that question. For me, at the time, remember it was the 80s that really influenced me, like what happened in those times. Those were my 20s, right? Or mid to early 20s. I have to say the films of Spike Lee were hugely influential for me. Because he was a really daring filmmaker and is to this day. He's phenomenal. He's also, he spoke from the heart as a filmmaker. He also was able to find a way to talk about personal stories and make them commercial, to find a way to communicate that. And that to me was inspirational at that time. I thought, hey, if he can look at what he's doing, why can't I do that, kind of thing. And so when I started writing, it was really, his films allowed me to just cut loose, if I may say it that way, and so I was just able to start writing and say, okay, well, I thought I was writing a genre film, but now I'm going somewhere else into family dramas and melodramas, and I'm going here into a musical, and this is kind of fun too, and let's put it all there, and it was really that ability to bust loose, that really came from his example in those early films of his in the 80s, just phenomenal, like, energetic young films that spoke to me, and it spoke to a lot of people at that time. And that was really kind of what gave me the courage to try and do what I did. I didn't, honestly, Desh Pradesh, I didn't know much about it. I was pretty isolated when I was making this film. I was like writing all the time. It was pretty lonely until then I suddenly had this wonderful crew and people to work with, and we were making the film. But until then, it was pretty isolated and nose to the ground kind of writing and hustling. And that's kind of the pattern of filmmaking, as you isolate, you write, and then you go out and you find people to work with. Sometimes the same. So insofar as why it disappeared later, yeah, certainly it became much more corporate. And I think there was a moment of, indie filmmaking in that time that kind of worked for many people. And then it stopped working for a lot of people because it closed down, as I said, and it closed down as a business too, in terms of the kind of films that I think were made. And for those who were able to make that transition, I think it worked on some level. And that's I think what happened. And for those who wanted to continue doing that,
I think a lot, especially with indie films, a lot of, films like Pulp Fiction made a huge amount of money, and that changed what people were looking for when they funded indie films. They weren't looking at like a film that, made its money back or, doubled its profit. They were looking at things like home runs or,
yeah.
And that really kind of corrupted even the independent side of the industry.
Yeah.
Later on.
Yeah, I think that's a very good observation. Yeah.
I will also say that one of the great things about this film is that I do think it's like there wasn't a lot of when that guy on TV is reading the lists of stars, like at the time I would have seen it, not known. I might have known who Amitabh Bachchan was, but I wouldn't known anybody else. And now it's a very different environment. I think a lot of it's because of films like this that sort of paved the way. But go ahead.
I mine was just sort of an observation or comment, and to that comment, and I guess about that diaspora kind of disappearing, because when we think of that time, and the film is still fresh, and yet there's an innocence to it, which I'll get to later. But that 80s, 90s, hey, we had an NDP premiere in 1990. And then the recession came, and we went to Mike Harris and conservatives, and the whole thing just, socially, ground to a halt too. And I think that has a lot to do with, unfortunately, what happened. And then we got a little bit better, and now we're back to a lot of conservatism. And I think it's directly reflected in the art that people produce, in the means of production and what they can do. But it is so fresh. And it just, the only thing that threw me back was because in the 80s, I so remember, like, even walking along with friends of mine that were from India, people going by in cars and saying Paki. And in a way that's so innocent right now compared to all the the racial incidences that happen now. Not what happened in the film was quite violent, but I don't know. Anyway, thank you. I saw it a number of times at the backstage Varsity. It really speaks to so much, and it's such a broad film. It's so impressive.
Thank you.
I really don't have.
But thanks for that anyway. I mean, we can do one, the last question. Yeah. Was there somebody? Sorry, I thought you were passing the mic to someone. Is there anyone?
Yeah, just a quick one. That was, I didn't expect that. I thought that was pretty cool. You got like social tones in there. You had cultural tones. The whole toilet paper bit, you turned a political thing into a comedy. That was really cool. How'd you go about writing the thing? And like, how did it come to you to write it?
I sat down. I had my first Mac Classic, I think it was. It was like the one we had to put in 2 discs, and I formatted a Word document to look like a script, and I started. And I had, cue cards on the wall with scenes, and I'd rearrange them, and I'd just hack my way through it. Yeah.
Did you always know you were going to play the main character?
No, I
or-
didn't. Again, it was a real issue of, in those days, there were not many actors, South Asian actors, especially men. People had, there was a running joke in my family. There was doctor, lawyer, engineer, and instead of names, and none of us became doctors, lawyers, or engineers, but that's what so many men became. And it's, in fact, there you are. Lawyer, one of my high school friends, so it's and a great one too. But it is that's what it was in those days. So there was just not many actors, and when we were casting, we had a real challenge, and we had ACTRA too. Like, we couldn't go ACTRA. We didn't have the money, and they had no provision for in indie films like ours. So there were some pretty good actors, but they were ACTRA, and that became a hassle. So again, we were in a bind, and it was 10 days before the shoot, and it was just like, you're the guy. Okay, we got to shoot. Everyone's lined up, and you're the guy. So it was like, and I had acted before. I mean, I had a theater company where we were all, it was a collaborative theater company, and it's like, okay, one more thing to do to make this film. So it was not something I expected or thought going in, but it's, that's what happened, and it's what it is. Yeah, it was good.
Well, thanks so much for the film, and it
Thank
was
you.
great to see it again, especially on 35, which I thought was wicked.
So let me take a moment to just do some thanks. Thanks first to you and to TIFF for screening the film in 35 millimeter. It's not often that I get to see a 35 millimeter print screened, projected. It's not a digital print. It was the original answer print, in fact, is what I realized when we looked at it. Because there were some credit things that we almost got sued for that we had to change, and they're still on the answer print. It was like, oh.
Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. Cut that.
We
from the-
can cut that from the tape.
And so that was one thing. So thank you for showing the film.
And then,
in
well, this is
print.
from because it's Krishna donated to the Film Reference Library, and that's why we have the print. So it's their staff and our tech staff.
And you should know that if you ever want to watch the film again, you can always go to the library here and request to watch it. And there's a DVD that you can watch it on, because I have the rights to the film again, and I haven't put it online or anything yet. I have to still do that. But in the meantime, it's available here at the library. So thank you to Steve and to Tiff for programming the film. And thank you to everyone I made this film with. And many of you are here. Phenomenal people. And it really you made a great experience for someone who just was flying, blind. And I think we all were, but we kind of got through it, and we made a very special thing. And that lives today. So thank you very much.
And thank you guys so much for coming. We are screening Canadian classics through the summer. We actually have an Icelandic theme. We're showing Guy Madden's Tales from the Gimli Hospital, Heima, the film about Sigur Rós, and Sturla Gunnarsson's Beowulf and Grendel. So hopefully you guys can make it out to that, and a couple special events on Canada Day as well. So hopefully you can make it. And thanks so much, man. That was a pleasure to show again.